The Vethkai commander Sorath 7 had catalogued 41 sapient species. None of them bled this easily. He stood at the edge of the docking bay and watched his crew extract the creature from what remained of the human transport, a crumpled, leaking thing that had come apart along the starboard coupling when the gravity anchor misfired. The transport was scrap. The human was, by any reasonable biological assessment, close behind it. His medical officer, Yenth 3, ran the handheld scanner over the body with the kind of careful professionalism that meant she was not yet sure it was alive. Calcium mineral skeleton, Yenth 3 said. Soft tissue throughout. No external plating. No hardened membrane. Blood pressure is... She paused. It operates on liquid pressure. Commander, it operates on liquid pressure. I'm aware of the basic biology. It is extraordinary that any of them survive infancy. Sorath said nothing. He watched the creature small, pale, one arm bent at the wrong angle breathe in short, ragged pulls. The recycled air of Deck 7 had a particular smell this close to the docking bay, machine oil and ozone, and the faint iron edge of whatever the human ran through its circulatory system. His crew moved around it with the careful distance they gave anything unfamiliar, as if fragility might be contagious. He crouched. He had studied humans enough to read the basic architecture: 2 limbs for locomotion, 2 for manipulation, sensory cluster at the top. But seeing the diagrams and standing over one that was actively falling apart were different experiences. The chest rose, fell, rose again. Each breath looked like an argument. "What are the survival odds?" he asked. "With intervention?" 63%. Yenth 3's crest tilted in what Sorath had learned to read as professional discomfort. Without. Perhaps 12. Intervene. I want it conscious. I have questions about what it was doing in this sector without a registered flight plan and, more pressingly, without any apparent survival equipment. He straightened. Behind him, Lieutenant Vrath 9 was watching with the particular stillness that meant he was storing information for later commentary. Sorath addressed him directly. "You have an observation. Only that it's very small, Commander. They all are." He looked at the human. The broken arm. The way its face had gone slack but not peaceful. The brow was tight, even unconscious, as if the creature were working through a problem it hadn't solved yet. Soft bones. No plating. Blood pressure for structural integrity. They live, apparently, on the continuous grace of nothing going wrong. He paused. It's remarkable they made it off their own planet. The laughter from his officers was brief and appreciative. Then the creature opened its eyes. Not gradually. Not the slow, confused surface return of most species coming out of trauma. One moment unconscious, the next watching him. The eyes were brown. Fixed. The kind of fixed that meant something was being evaluated. "My ship," it said. The translator rendered it flat, but the voice underneath was not. "What happened to my ship?" Not a question. An accounting. Sorath met its gaze. "Destroyed. The docking anchor failed on approach. You were the only survivor." Something moved through the creature's face, a compression, a swallowing, and then it was gone. The eyes stayed fixed. "How bad is the anchor damage? Can it be repaired?" Yenth 3 made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "It is asking about..." "I heard what it asked." Sorath studied the creature. The broken arm. The blood drying at its temple. "The anchor will take 6 hours to repair. You are not in a position to assist." "I'm a rated mechanic," it said. "What kind of anchor?" "You have a compound fracture of your..." "What kind of anchor?" He told it. It closed its eyes, not passing out, he realized, but thinking, and then it told him 3 things about the Vethkai Mark IV gravity coupling that his own engineers had not mentioned in the damage report. Things that were correct. Then it passed out again. Sorath stood over it for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. "Get it to medical," he said, "and find out its name." The name was in the transport's registry, which his crew pulled from the wreckage. Draper. First name, Kayla. Rank, technical specialist. First class, UNN, Merchant Marine. Age by human reckoning, 31. The photograph in the registry showed the same face, brown eyes, no particular expression, and below it, under emergency contacts, a single name with a notation, deceased. Sorath filed that under background data and went back to running his fleet. She ate the nutrient paste they gave her and asked for more. Sorath filed that under inefficient biology. She ate the second portion. Then she sat up, ignored the medical officer's protests with the specific quality of ignoring that suggested she'd heard and simply hadn't changed her mind, and began examining her own arm, which Yenth 3 had set and splinted while she was unconscious with the clinical interest of someone assessing repair work that wasn't theirs. "It's adequate," she said finally. "High praise," Yenth 3 said, very dry. The human draper looked at her, a beat of silence that wasn't unfriendly. "It's straight. It'll hold. That's what matters." She flexed her fingers, watching them. "How long was I out?" 14 hours. "What'd I miss?" That was how Sorath found her when he came for his morning assessment of the medical bay, sitting up in the recovery bed, working through a bowl of nutrient paste with the methodical efficiency of someone fueling an engine, asking Yenth 3 questions about the ship's drive configuration. Yenth 3 was, against all apparent intention, answering them. Sorath stopped in the doorway. Draper looked up. "Commander, you're awake. 14 hours was enough." She set the bowl down. Her eyes tracked to the viewport behind him, the long sweep of stars. And there, at the edge of sensor range, the debris field his navigation team had flagged an hour ago. She went still. "What is that?" "A debris field. We're cataloging it now. Those are colony markers." Her voice had changed. Not louder, quieter actually, which was worse. "The orange ones. UNN colony emergency markers. That's a human settlement." "Was," Sorath said, because he believed in precision. "It appears to have been destroyed approximately 72 hours ago." Draper's face did something then that his translation matrix could not process. It wasn't grief in the Vethkai sense, the formal contraction, the ritual withdrawal. It was more like a building deciding whether or not to fall, and then not falling. The face went still, the jaw set. The brown eyes did something he couldn't name. "How many survivors?" she asked. Probability assessment places the likelihood at how many. The debris field is too dense for accurate. "Has anyone looked?" The question landed in the room with a particular weight. Yenth 3 had stopped pretending to review her instruments. Sorath held the human's gaze and said, with the patience he extended to species that processed information differently, "The survival probability is functionally 0. We will log the incident and continue our, I want to go in. You have a compound fracture and a grade 2 concussion." "Yes." She was already looking at the debris field. "And?" He explained it to her the way he explained difficult mathematics to junior officers. Clearly, without condescension, covering each variable. The debris density, the suit limitations of the one emergency EVA kit his ship carried that she could physically fit into, the oxygen math. The probability curves that, stacked in any combination, returned the same answer. She listened. She nodded in the places that suggested she'd understood. And then she said, "I'd like access to the docking bay." I said no. "I heard you." She met his eyes. "I'd like access to the docking bay." He left her in medical. He told the docking bay crew to log any attempt at unauthorized access and report it to him directly. 2 hours later, the report came. She had bypassed the secondary docking lock, using a plasma cutter from the emergency kit. A length of cable from the supply locker she'd apparently talked Yenth 3 into unlocking for an unrelated reason, and, according to the inspection report that followed, a piece of the heel of her left boot fashioned into a makeshift contact bridge. She was already in the debris field before he could recall her. Sorath stood at the docking bay viewport and watched the small orange light of her suit move through the wreckage, and did not, for the first time in his career, know what entry to make in the log. She came back with 2 survivors. The math still said 0. The airlock cycled, and Sorath was there. When it opened, he told himself it was command responsibility. And what came through was Draper, moving at the particular speed of someone who had decided that stopping was a form of dying. Her suit was compromised at the left shoulder. He could see the emergency sealant she'd applied from inside a gray-pink smear over a 3-centimeter breach, and it was holding, barely, in the way that things held when they had been asked to do something they weren't rated for. She was carrying a child on each hip, both alive, both in emergency microsuits, the kind kept in colony shelter pods, rated for 4 hours. Both had about 40 minutes left on their oxygen. She had calculated this. He understood, looking at her face, that she had been calculating it for the entire return trip, and that it had been close. She handed the children to Yenth 3 and the junior medic who'd materialized behind her, and then her legs decided that they had covered their contractual obligation, and she went down. Not falling, she caught herself on the airlock frame, lowered herself, ended up sitting on the deck, plating with her back against the bulkhead and her splinted arm across her knees. She began patching the shoulder breach with a second application of sealant from a tube she produced from somewhere inside the suit. Methodical, like she was caulking a window. Sorath crouched in front of her. He did this slowly, the way you moved around something you'd misidentified. Why? He said. It wasn't the question he'd planned. He'd planned a question about unauthorized docking bay access and the specific sections of interspecies transit protocol she had violated. What came out was simpler. Why did you go? She looked at him. The brown eyes were very tired. There was a cut above one of them that Yenth 3 had sealed but not fully cleaned, and there was dried blood in her eyebrow. Because they were there, she said. He waited for the rest. There was no rest. She went back to patching the breach. That is not a sufficient, he started. It's the only answer I have. She pressed the sealant flat with her thumb, checked the seal. You wanted me to leave them because the math said they were already dead. A pause. The math was wrong. The probability assessment was correct, given the available 2 kids in a colony pod, she said. 60 hours of air. They had 10 hours left when I found them. She looked at him. The probability assessment didn't account for the pod's secondary insulation reducing heat signature. It didn't account for the debris cluster at Grid 7 creating a partial radar shadow. She looked back at the seal. It didn't account for someone going to look. Sorath had no response to this. He was a commander of 40 years. He had navigated political crises and spatial anomalies, and 2 genuine wars, and 1 situation that still didn't have a proper classification. He produced responses to things. That was what he did. He had nothing. Yenth 3 appeared at his shoulder. Commander, the children are stable. The specialist needs bone knit on the original fracture. She's reopened it and fluids, and approximately 12 hours of unconsciousness, whether she agrees to it or not. I'm fine, Draper said. You are objectively not, Yenth 3 said, with the specific tone of someone who had crossed some line and found it liberating. Come. Draper let herself be helped up. At the door of the airlock she paused and looked back at Sorath, still crouching, still on the deck, and said, Thank you for not locking the bay down when you could have. He had not locked the bay down. He had told himself it was because she'd already cleared the outer door before the order could be effective. He was not entirely sure that was true. He watched her go. Then he stood and went back to his command chair and spent a long time looking at the debris field. The Keth Vor arrived 6 hours later. They were the ones who destroyed the colony. Sorath recognized the ship configuration immediately. 3 Keth Vor heavy intercept vessels, running hot on the main drive, which meant they had not come to talk first. The signal came in on the standard diplomatic band, which was the Keth Vor way of conducting aggression with plausible deniability. The message was, You have removed materials from a restricted area. You will return them. The materials were the children. Sorath stood at his command station and ran the calculation. His ship against 3 heavies was an acceptable fight if he held range and burned the maneuvering thrusters on the efficient curve. But he was already down 20% on hull integrity from the docking incident, and the Keth Vor flew in coordinated fire patterns that his current crew positioning didn't counter well. The calculation returned a number he didn't like. He was reaching for the communication array to begin negotiation which, with the Keth Vor, meant buying himself time to find a better number when Draper walked onto the bridge. She should not have been able to walk. Yenth 3 had given her the fluids and the bone knit, and had apparently lost the battle over the 12 hours of unconsciousness. She was in her flight suit, which someone had cleaned. The splint was gone, replaced with a rigid brace. She moved like something that hurt, but had decided to table the discussion. She looked at the tactical display. She looked at the 3 red signatures of the Kethvor ships. She looked at the single blue signature of his. "They want the kids," she said. "They have made a retrieval request, yes. They'll kill them. The Kethvor are not in the habit of—" "They destroyed a colony," she said. Flat. No inflection. The voice of someone reading from a list of facts. "Those kids survived. They're witnesses." She looked at him. "They'll kill them." He held her gaze. He did not tell her she was wrong. She walked to the airlock corridor, where the children were housed in the temporary quarters Yenth 3 had arranged, and she stood in front of the door with her arms at her sides, and nothing in her hands, and the specific quality of stillness that he had, in 40 years of command, seen exactly twice before, both times in soldiers who had already made the decision and were waiting for the situation to catch up. "You hand them over," she said. "You do it through me." "Specialist." He kept his voice level. "I have 3 armed vessels targeting this ship. I have 26 crew. I am not going to—" She picked up a docking tool from the equipment rack on the corridor wall. Not a weapon. A torque driver, rated for hull seal work. She held it like she knew what it was. "Get me on comms with the Kethvor." "Absolutely not. Commander." She looked at him. "Get me on comms. I will buy you time. However much I can. You use it." A pause. "Please." He had run the calculation 4 times. It returned the same number each time. The number was bad. He had no reason, tactical, political, or rational, to give a human specialist access to his diplomatic comms in an active standoff with 3 armed vessels. He opened the channel. She talked. He had studied many species. He had sat through diplomatic negotiations, hostage exchanges, ceasefire arrangements. What Draper did on that open channel was not any of those things. She talked the way water moves around a rock, not fighting the current, finding every available path. She asked the Kethvor commander about transit jurisdiction. She disputed the spatial coordinates of the debris field. She raised a procedural question about the retrieval request's documentation that was, as far as Sorath could tell, entirely invented but detailed enough to require a response. She spoke slowly. She asked for clarification. She made the Kethvor commander repeat himself. She was burning seconds. Sorath looked at his tactical officer. His tactical officer looked at him. Something moved between them that was not a spoken order, and not quite an understanding, more like a recognition. He nodded. His crew went to combat stations without making a sound. Sorath made a decision that his fleet council would question for years. He sided with the human. He didn't decide it the way he made most decisions. The careful assembly of variables, the probability matrix, the cost-benefit architecture that had guided 40 years of command. It arrived the way the debris field had arrived, just there, suddenly, with all its implications already attached. Draper was still on the channel. The Kethvor commander was getting faster, sharper. He'd noticed the stalling, or noticed something, because the 3 ships had adjusted their approach vector, no longer holding position. "Coming in." Sorath cut across the channel. "Kethvor vessel. This is Commander Sorath 7 of the Vethkai 7th Intercept Fleet. The individuals aboard this ship are under my fleet's protection. Stand down." A beat of silence. Then, "Commander, you are 1 damaged ship. Step aside." "I am 1 damaged ship," Sorath agreed. "Consider what that means for your probability assessment." He closed the channel. "All weapons, full charge. Navigation, give me the efficient burn curve on the portside intercept. Let's see how they fly in close formation." What followed was 23 minutes of the most expensive decision of Sorath's career. The Kethvor flew well. He already knew that. What he hadn't fully accounted for was Draper, who reappeared on the bridge 40 seconds into the engagement, strapped into the secondary fire coordination station, a position that required someone to be both rated and insane, and began feeding his tactical officer, targeting data with the cool specificity of someone who had done this before. Not as a specialist. as something else. He filed that question for later. His ship took a hull breach on Deck 4. Lost the secondary communications array. Lost power to 2 of the lateral thrusters for 4 minutes before his engineers rerouted. The Kethvor lead vessel took a direct hit on its drive manifold and had to break formation. His crew, who had been together for 3 years and knew each other's rhythms the way musicians knew a shared piece, held. Then the Kethvor withdrew. Not because he'd beaten them. He hadn't. Quite. They had pulled back with the deliberate economy of ships that were reassessing the math and didn't like the new numbers. Sorath was still trying to understand why the numbers had changed when Draper, still at the secondary station, said, "Tight beam confirmed. UNN patrol response. ETA, 11 minutes. He looked at her. "I sent it during the stall," she said, "when you gave me the channel." She looked at the tactical display, the retreating Kethvor signatures, the incoming UNN beacon. They won't come back. Not with a patrol fleet in sector. The bridge was very quiet. "You planned that," he said. "Before you stepped in front of the door. I needed the channel to transmit." She unfastened herself from the station. She was bleeding again. The exertion had opened something that Yenth 3 had not yet had the opportunity to close. She looked at her sleeve, decided it was manageable. "And I needed a reason for you to give it to me." Sorath looked at her for a long time. He was aware that his bridge crew was watching him. He was aware of the sound of his damaged ship, the slightly wrong vibration in the deck plating where the hull breach had stressed the frame, the compensating hum of the rerouted power conduits, Vrath 9's quiet voice on the crew channel confirming damage assessments, the sounds of a ship that had been in a fight and was still flying. "You're not a technical specialist, first class," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am," she said. Now, she held his gaze. "I wasn't always." He didn't ask what she had been. The emergency contact in the registry had said times deceased. The hands at the fire coordination station had said something else. He catalogued both entries and left space for the rest of the story to fill in when it chose to. "Your rank," he said. "Your full rank. Technical specialist, first class, UNN Merchant Marine." A pause. "Formerly, Staff Gunnery Sergeant, UNN Marine Raiders, 3rd Engagement Group." She said it the way you said a thing that was over but not gone. "I retired." "After what?" "After enough. The UNN patrol fleet arrived in 8 minutes, not 11. Efficient. The Kethvor signatures had already cleared the sector. The children were unharmed. Yenth 3, who had tracked the entire engagement from medical, with the expression of someone who had stopped being surprised and started being impressed, sent Sorath a message, asking if the specialist was going to need surgical intervention, or if she would just patch herself with boot parts again. Sorath closed his command log and opened a new entry in his species catalog. Homo sapiens. Terran origin. Classification. Sapient. Biologically fragile. Do not mistake these 2 facts for a single conclusion. No external plating. Calcium skeleton. Operates on liquid pressure. Survival is, by any structural analysis, improbable. They go into 0 probability debris fields for the children. They stand in doorways without weapons. They make you give them the communications channel by making it cost more not to. They run calculations you cannot see until they are already finished. They have a word I have learned it since for the thing they do. The willingness to spend themselves on the outcome, not the odds. They call it not leaving someone behind. They say it simply. They do not explain it. They do not have to. Recommendation. Do not underestimate. Do not mock. Do not stand between a human and someone they have decided to protect. Above all, if they ask for the channel, give them the channel. You will want to know what they do with it. He saved the entry. On the other side of the viewport, the stars held their positions indifferent, vast, unchanged by any of this. His ship moved through them with the particular dignity of a vessel that had taken damage and kept its course. Vrath 9 brought him a cup of ship coffee, which tasted like recycled regret and was, in this moment, exactly right. From medical, via the crew channel, Yenth 3's voice. "She's agreed to 4 hours. Do not disturb her unless the ship is on fire." "Understood," Sorath said. He drank his coffee. He watched the stars. He thought about the brown eyes that had opened, not gradually, not confused, and the first thing she had asked. My ship. What happened to my ship? Not times, where am I? Not times, am I dying? The ship. The people on it. The thing outside herself. Already. Before she'd had time to remember that she was the one who was hurt. He added one more line to the catalog entry. They wake up asking about someone else. Every time.